It really makes you stop and think, When a murder happens in the U.S. today,
Mm-hmm.
the chances of it actually being solved are, well, not much better than a coin flip.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty stark assessment from Thomas Hargrove over at the Murder Accountability Project.
Mm-hmm.
We're just seeing this unsettling climb in the number of murders that just go cold.
It's a disturbing trend, definitely. And what's really coming into focus now are maybe potential ways we might be able to shift that,
Yeah.
change that direction.
Right.
We're digging into why so many cases stay unsolved and looking at some of the innovative strategies being explored.
Exactly. For this deep dive, we've looked at a whole range of materials, a CBS News investigation that really just lays out the scale of the issue, some fascinating discussions around like open source investigation techniques,
Mm.
how they're being applied.
Right, and the role of AI, artificial intelligence, which is a huge topic.
Huge. And also the sort of practical ethical considerations around all of it. So our goal here is to get a clear picture, why do these cases stall? And what new solutions are actually on the horizon? Give us a solid understanding of this, well, pretty complex landscape.
Let's start by looking closer at that core problem.
Hmm.
The increasing number of unsolved murders, the CBS News investigation you mentioned, highlights some really concerning FBI statistics. They show the rate at which murders are being solved. Well, it's dropped to its lowest point in over half a century.
It's a really significant decline. And something that just jumps right out is the profound racial disparity in those figures.
Yeah.
The CBS analysis of, I think it was 2020 data, showed murders of white victims are considerably more likely to be solved. Something like 30% more likely than for Hispanic victims,
Yeah.
and a staggering 50% more likely than when the victims are black. It just makes you wonder about the factors behind that.
And these aren't just, abstract numbers. They represent real, profound personal tragedies. The experience of Danita Williams in Jackson, Mississippi, that really brings it home.
Her 20-year-old son was murdered. And 3 months later, despite her offering information, trying to help, still no arrests. You can just feel her frustration, that sense of, utter helplessness.
Absolutely. And it's clear that in a lot of places, it's not necessarily a lack of will from law enforcement, but just a severe strain on resources.
Exactly.
Jackson, for instance, you mentioned, they had only 8 homicide detectives handling 153 murders in 1 year.
Right. And if you think about FBI guidelines suggesting no more than, say, 5 cases per detective,
They were facing an almost impossible situation, just completely overwhelmed.
and this points to some really deep-seated systemic challenges. Danielle Outlaw, she was the Philadelphia police commissioner, brought up a critical point about the erosion of trust, between police and the communities they serve.
Yeah, that trust gap.
She links this to, well, long-standing systemic inequalities and also those high-profile incidents of misconduct we've all seen. And that breakdown in trust, it has a very real impact on investigations, doesn't it? When people don't trust the police, they're, understandably less likely to come forward with crucial tips or cooperate as witnesses.
It creates a major obstacle, a huge one for detectives trying to actually solve these crimes.
Yeah.
And what's striking is that this isn't just, one city's problem. The CBS analysis showed consistently low clearance rates in quite a few states: Maryland, Texas, Michigan, California.
Right.
It indicates a widespread challenge, which means countless families are just enduring these agonizing waits for answers for years.
We heard some truly heartbreaking stories that illustrate this perfectly. Marcia Mays, her 3-year-old son, was killed by a stray bullet in Minneapolis over a decade ago, still waiting for justice.
10 years. Wow.
And Minneapolis itself had a concerningly low clearance rate, around 53% in the decade after his murder. Then there's Barbara Pritchett Hughes in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
She lost 2 sons. Unimaginable.
Oh.
One case was solved relatively quickly, but the other, still a mystery after 6 years. And it starkly highlights those racial disparities in the LAPD's clearance rates. It was something like 45% for black victims compared to 70% for white victims during that time.
That's a huge difference.
Yeah, they've even offered a significant reward, $50,000 in her unsolved son's case. Still nothing.
And it's also important to understand how clearance rates are actually reported sometimes. It can kind of obscure the full picture.
How so?
Well, take Chicago. They report a lower clearance rate, sure, but they also have a really high number of cases listed as exceptionally cleared.
Exceptionally cleared. What does that mean exactly?
It means the police consider the case closed for administrative reasons, basically. Even if there's no arrest, no prosecution. The story of Diego Velada is a chilling example. His murder was witnessed, a suspect was arrested, but ultimately not charged. They said lack of evidence. And the case exceptionally cleared.
So on paper, it's solved. But for his sister, who saw him die, identified the killer. No justice.
Precisely. So it suggests the actual rate of killers being brought to justice in Chicago could be much, much lower. Some estimates suggest maybe 3 out of 4 killers that are still free.
That's a really unsettling thought.
Hmm.
And I guess facing these kinds of difficulties, we're seeing some, well, interesting, maybe unconventional strategies emerge.
Yeah, like in Baltimore, they're using what some are calling the Al Capone strategy.
The Al Capone strategy.
Yeah, basically focusing on prosecuting murder suspects for other crimes, like drug offenses maybe, as a way to get some level of accountability when actually proving the murder charge is proving too difficult.
Huh. Okay, so finding another way to get them off the streets.
Pretty much. Okay, let's delve deeper now into the sheer volume of these unsolved cases. The cold case backlog.
Right.
An article addressing the cold case backlog points to literally hundreds of thousands of unsolved homicides across the U.S. Hundreds of thousands.
Wow.
And it notes that steady decline in the rate crimes are solved ever since the 1980s. Back then, it was around 70% of homicides were cleared.
70% down to roughly 50% now? That's a dramatic drop.
Huge. And the pandemic, as the article mentions, has unfortunately only made the situation worse, piled on the pressure.
And it's this massive backlog, I guess, that's fueling interest in these other approaches like open source or crowdsourced investigations.
Exactly. Cheryl McCollum is a big advocate for this. She emphasizes the need to use new technologies and also the diverse skills of people outside traditional law enforcement structures.
So bringing in fresh eyes, different expertise.
Yeah, and what's noteworthy about this model is the idea of leveraging, as McCollum puts it, every available tool every single time.
Okay.
This includes those cutting-edge forensic techniques like phenotyping, ancestral linkage, things we didn't have even a decade ago.
The JonBenet Ramsey case seems like a perfect example of why this fresh perspective and retesting evidence with modern methods is so critical.
Definitely. Her family has been actively petitioning for an independent agency to take a completely fresh look at the case using precisely these kinds of advancements.
John Andrew Ramsey, her half-brother, he offered a really insightful viewpoint on this. He recognizes the ideal, having dedicated, motivated detectives on every single case.
Sure, that's the dream scenario.
But he also gets the reality. Under-resourced departments, overworked detectives.
Right.
And he sees the passion within the true crime community and the vast amount of public information in some cases as potentially a really valuable resource.
And if we connect this back to why this backlog even exists, the reasons become pretty clear.
Yeah.
Underfunding often leads to understaffing, limited resources for essential things like evidence testing. And while ultimately cold cases can become a lower priority for detectives already buried under current active caseloads.
It's a cycle.
Yeah.
And we can't underestimate the just profound, lasting impact these unsolved cases have on families.
Oh, absolutely.
Michael Holbrook's research on secondary victims, it really highlights the persistent grief, the feelings of powerlessness, the immense difficulty in moving on.
And the trauma. Real long-term psychological trauma. He talks about insomnia, constant insecurity, that deep erosion of trust. It's just a devastating, enduring wound for these families.
And this is exactly why these innovative solutions, the ones being explored within that open source framework, are so significant.
Right. These include things like implementing regular reviews of cold cases, just systematically looking at them again, even if no new evidence has popped up.
Proactive reviews.
Exactly. Tapping into the expertise of retired investigators, citizen detectives, those OSINT open source intelligence analysts, and crucially, increasing investment in advanced DNA tech.
We've definitely seen the remarkable results from genetic genealogy,
Mm-hmm.
the Golden State Killer case, the Stephanie Isaacson case. Labs like Othram proved pivotal decades after the crimes.
Absolutely game-changing. And the emergence of crowdfunding options through organizations like Othram, Parabon, initiatives like Season of Justice, it really shows a public desire to contribute financially to this vital work. People want to help.
That's encouraging.
What's also encouraging is this growing trend of partnerships. Law enforcement teaming up with academic institutions.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, the collaboration between Michigan State Police and Western Michigan University on the Roxanne Wood case is one example, and the Cold Case Center and podcast at the College of St. Rose.
Right.
These partnerships bring fresh perspectives, additional resources to unsolved crimes. And developing comprehensive information sharing systems like the uncovered.com database, that has the potential to be a real game changer too, connecting the dots across jurisdictions.
Paul Gretton Jr. from the NYPD made a key point, didn't he? He said the future of law enforcement will undoubtedly involve, like, unprecedented communication and input from a whole range of sources.
Yeah, breaking down silos. And this isn't just talk, we're seeing legislative movement too.
Yeah.
There's the Federal Homicide Victims Family Rights Act of 2021
Okay.
and state-level laws like Georgia's Coleman-Baker Act, plus ongoing advocacy in states like Alabama and New York, so there's momentum building.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit now and turn our attention to another potentially transformative tool in cracking cold cases: artificial intelligence, AI.
Right. An article from Morton Solicitors discussed a trial by Avon and Somerset Police. They used this AI tool called Suze.
Suze.
Yeah. This system reviewed 27 complex cases in just 30 hours, and they estimated that doing that manually would take a human investigator, get this, 81 years.
81 years versus 30 hours. That's almost unbelievable, the difference in time. So how exactly can AI help crack these cases that have been dormant for so long?
Well, what's particularly powerful about AI here is its ability to analyze the just vast amounts of data often tied to cold cases.
Right, all the files, reports.
Exactly. Witness statements, forensic reports, maybe old surveillance footage, investigative documents. AI can sift through all that and identify patterns, connections that a human investigator might simply miss because of the sheer volume.
So it's like having this incredibly efficient research assistant that just never gets tired or overlooks anything.
Kind of, yeah. And there are other ways it can be applied too. Facial recognition, for instance.
Yep.
Scanning old photos, videos, potentially identifying people even if their appearance has changed a lot over time. Maybe even matching unidentified victims with missing persons databases.
And DNA analysis, you mentioned that earlier.
Definitely. AI algorithms are making huge strides there. Speed, accuracy, assisting in finding those familial links through public genetic databases like we saw with the Golden State Killer. Groundbreaking stuff.
And I can imagine just sifting through mountains of text, old case files, transcripts. That must be another area where AI really shines.
Absolutely. Natural language processing, NLP, it can meticulously go through all that historical text. Pinpoint critical keywords, recurring patterns, inconsistencies.
Things that might jump out if you could read everything at once.
Exactly. It can even compare seemingly unrelated cases, looking for commonalities that might have been overlooked years ago. Maybe linking crimes previously thought to be separate.
That could be incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
What about gaining insights into the perpetrators themselves?
Well, AI can even contribute there. Through predictive policing concepts and behavioral analysis, it might help anticipate a perpetrator's potential next steps or provide insights into their psychological profile, especially useful maybe in serial cases.
Okay.
Plus, AI can spot potential links between cold cases across different jurisdictions based on things like location, the MO, the victim profile, and finally, AI can even be used to examine social media, online stuff, maybe uncover new leads that way, or just reignite public interest, which might bring new witnesses forward.
It sounds incredibly promising. But that Morton Solicitors article did mention some challenges, right? Practical hurdles.
Yeah, that's a crucial point. The quality of the data itself is a big one. Cold cases often mean incomplete info, outdated files. Stuff might be missing.
Garbage in, garbage out, potentially.
For some extent, yeah. And there's also the need to make sure these powerful tools are applied effectively and, within existing legal frameworks. It's not magic.
So it's not a straightforward flick-a-switch solution.
Not at all. I think the prevailing view is that AI is most effective as a powerful tool to support human detectives, augment their skills rather than replace them entirely.
The legalpdf.io article you shared goes into more detail about specific ways advanced data mining with AI is finding new leads, connecting seemingly unrelated bits of information. Can you give us some examples of that in action?
What's really remarkable is how AI can now link evidence from a crime scene to potential suspects in ways that were just impossible before, like rapidly comparing DNA against massive criminal databases, or even finding connections through partial DNA matches by searching those public genealogy databases.
Like those cold case arrests back in 2018.
Exactly. AI can also mine firearm registries, potentially linking weapons to ballistics evidence, maybe even fingerprints that were missed first time round. It can match tiny things, fibers, materials found at a scene to huge product databases.
Wow.
Even old handwritten notes can now be analyzed using optical character recognition and NLP to uncover overlooked clues or patterns.
The sheer volume of digital data we all generate now,
Yeah.
smartphones, social media, that must be an absolute goldmine for these AI tools.
Yep, absolutely. It's an exponential growth of potentially relevant information. AI can analyze the metadata, the info about the data to pinpoint location patterns, identify relationships between people, track communications, placing suspects at specific times and locations connected to the crime.
And you mentioned significant advances in how AI is used in DNA analysis specifically.
Yeah, machine learning is making huge strides. AI can now more effectively analyze degraded or limited DNA samples, piecing together partial profiles that might have been useless before. That research out of UC Davis, boosting identification rates by up to 70%. That's truly remarkable.
70% boost, wow.
Yeah. We're also seeing advancements in DNA phenotyping, predicting physical traits from DNA, and much better analysis of complex DNA mixtures, like when multiple people were involved.
It's incredible what they can do with DNA now. What about all those old case files, the ones packed with actual paper documents?
Yeah.
Boxes and boxes of them.
NLP, natural language processing, is proving invaluable there. AI can rapidly analyze massive amounts of that unstructured text in old documents, quickly identifying names, dates, locations, relationships, spotting patterns that a human reading thousands of pages might easily miss.
Right.
The research from University of Lausanne on automatically extracting event timelines, and the Dutch police using NLP to re-examine thousands of unsolved crimes, looking for similarities, even translating old slang or jargon. It really highlights the potential. It can even infer things about a suspect's background or personality from their word choices, their grammar.
And with visual evidence being so prevalent now, cameras everywhere.
Advanced image recognition is playing a bigger and bigger role, re-examining photos, CCTV footage from recent and older cases. AI can enhance low-res images, making it possible to see crucial details, vehicles, weapons, subtle facial features.
Things you couldn't make out before.
Exactly. Facial recognition tech can potentially link suspects across decades, different locations. There are techniques to estimate height from security footage, even identifying people previously unnoticed just lurking in the background of crime scene photos.
Wow.
And AI can even spot subtle visual anomalies in images, like petechiae indicating strangulation, that might have been initially overlooked or misinterpreted by a human eye.
Okay, so it sounds like AI can generate a significant number of potential new leads. How do investigators then, effectively prioritize those, follow up on them?
That's where predictive analytics comes in. By analyzing crime scene evidence and patterns from solved cases, AI can generate profiles of likely individuals who might be involved in unsolved crimes, identifying basically statistical doppelgangers.
Statistical doppelgangers.
Yeah, cold cases that bear striking similarities to ones that have been solved. The work by Brent Schroeder in Clark County, Washington, identifying those kinds of connections is a great example. Researchers at NYU are even training AI to estimate the probability of guilt based on forensics and victimology.
That sounds potentially controversial.
It is, and it's really important to emphasize these tools are designed to generate leads. They still require thorough human investigation. Careful oversight is absolutely essential to avoid misuse or bias.
Understanding motive is often such a critical piece of the puzzle in solving a crime. Can AI help there at all?
Sentiment analysis, that's another interesting application. It involves extracting emotional cues from text. It can be a valuable tool for mapping relationships between individuals and potentially uncovering underlying motives.
How's that work?
By analyzing witness statements, interview transcripts, even personal communications like emails or journals, AI can help reveal hidden tensions, power dynamics. The analysis of the Enron emails is a famous example of finding unnoticed emotional patterns in huge datasets.
Right.
Now, context is always key, as Lisa Feldman Barrett points out, but sentiment analysis has, as she says, vast untapped potential in helping understand the social and psychological factors behind a crime. You could even analyze public forums, social media maybe, to identify rising tensions relevant to a case.
All of this sounds like it could save investigators just a tremendous amount of time and resources, cut down on the legwork.
Absolutely. Automating that often really tedious process of reviewing vast amounts of documents leads to significant time and cost savings. Digitizing paper files, using machine learning to rapidly process thousands of pages, it surfaces key info, creates timelines much faster than manual review.
Are there examples of this actually uncovering things?
Yeah, the examples from Anne Arundel County, Maryland, and Ventura County, California, where AI helped uncover previously missed evidence, are really compelling. And the Toronto Police Service estimated saving over $1 million by using these methods.
Over $1 million.
Yeah. But again, the key takeaway is that AI assists human investigators. It flags crucial information efficiently, spots inconsistencies that might otherwise just go unnoticed in the sheer volume of paper.
And finally, you mentioned AI might help overcome a common challenge in investigations, something inherently human.
Yes, confirmation bias. That natural tendency we all have to interpret information in a way that confirms what we already believe.
Right, seeing what you expect to see.
Exactly, which can unfortunately lead investigators down the wrong path sometimes. Because AI is an objective tool, it can analyze all the available data without those inherent human biases.
Do we have an example of that?
Yeah, the Netherlands Forensic Institute example. An AI-driven review of DNA evidence highlighted a different potential suspect than the one investigators had initially focused on. It just looked at the data neutrally. As Matthew Lieberman put it, AI has no inherent interest in seeing a particular outcome, it just weighs the information.
It's clear that AI presents incredible opportunities for advancing investigations, especially cold cases. But yeah, thoughtful implementation is absolutely crucial to make sure it's effective and fair.
Okay, shifting focus slightly, that Reddit discussion you found brings up this intriguing idea of just everyday people getting involved, trying to help solve cold cases, this concept of internet detectives. Yeah, what's interesting there is just the clear desire of some people in the public to contribute their time, their skills. One user, Jealous Walrus 6921, shared their own experience. They found what they believed was significant information in an old case they were just researching on their own.
And there's also that suggestion in the thread about uploading DNA results to GED match for genetic genealogy, which, as we've discussed, has proven to be a really powerful tool in certain cases.
Definitely. However, that cautionary note raised by the deleted user, it's certainly worth considering.
Right, the potential dangers.
Yeah, they highlighted the risks for individuals who aren't law enforcement getting actively involved in homicide investigations, like misinterpreting information, potentially interfering with an official investigation, or even, inadvertently putting themselves in harm's way.
Which, as you noted, did get a sort of dark but undeniably humorous response from another user. But it does underscore the complexities, the potential pitfalls of civilian involvement in active, sensitive investigations. And the user who started the thread, Eilish Billy, they did specify an interest in older cases, maybe intuitively recognizing some of those limitations or dangers.
That distinction is probably an important one. While the enthusiasm, the fresh perspectives of citizen detectives can potentially be valuable, navigating the intricacies of active investigations really requires a deep understanding of legal protocols, evidence handling, all the sensitivities involved. It's tricky.
Right. Finally, our last source, that Listverse article. It serves as just a stark reminder that there are countless unsolved disappearances and murders out there that never capture the big headlines. They exist far beyond the few high-profile cases we tend to hear about over and over.
What's striking is the sheer diversity and the long history of these unsolved mysteries. The article details cases stretching way back 1866, the murder of Herman Ehrenberg in Arizona over gold theft.
Wow, 1866.
Yeah, and geographically, all over the place. The brutal axe murders of Nels and Annie Anderson in Montana in 1924. The unsettling disappearance of Kathy Moulton in Maine in 1971.
We also saw that really perplexing case of Olga Mauger, who just vanished during a hike in Wyoming back in 1934, and the disturbing capital city killings in Wisconsin, a series of murders over, 14 years, 1968 to 1982, seemed to target a specific victim profile.
And these lesser-known cases, like the disappearance of Mary Virginia Carpenter right after arriving at college in Texas in 1948, or that enduring, heartbreaking mystery of the boy in the box in Philadelphia in 1957.
Still unidentified.
Still unidentified. They powerfully underscore the lasting grief, the profound lack of closure experienced by so many families. Whether their loved one's case is widely known or not, the pain is the same.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, we're left with this really compelling, maybe somewhat paradoxical situation. We have this persistent, even growing challenge of unsolved murders, existing right alongside the exciting, rapidly evolving potential of new technologies and these collaborative strategies aimed at tackling them.
What seems evident is that there are real systemic issues within traditional law enforcement structures that contribute to these stubbornly low clearance rates. Resources, trust, caseloads. However, the emergence of these open source investigation models, well, it offers a promising alternative. Harnessing diverse expertise using cutting-edge tech and AI, artificial intelligence, presents this powerful suite of tools for re-examining cold cases with just unprecedented efficiency and objectivity.
And underlying it all?
Underlying it all, that fundamental human desire for justice. Coupled with the dedication of professionals and the engagement of informed citizens, that remains a crucial driving force in pursuing answers for these families.
So here's where it really gets interesting to think about. With these new tools, these new approaches now available, what might the future of justice actually look like for the families of those whose cases have made cold for so long?
Yeah.
There's a greater sense of closure finally within reach for more of them.
That's the hope, isn't it?
Yeah. And what will be the true role of technology and community involvement in striking that really delicate balance between, the technological advancement, the practical application, ethical responsibility, and that deeply ingrained human need for answers, for accountability? Certainly gives you a lot to think about.